This is day 2 of the 30-day challenge. This video was initially going to be a room tour and just a look around what I've currently got here. But what I wanted to do is, rather than do what most YouTubers do where they just put up what they've currently got, I wanted to show you through the years of how it got this far. It's not been a quick process. I first moved into this house 5 years ago, and since then that's when I first started making this room into what it is now. You'll see from the videos there have been some drastic changes from when I started and some little changes. The main reason for this is just to show that for a lot of people, including myself, that it's not an overnight thing. Some things do take time to get hold of. You do have to save sometimes, especially when you're only earning your standard 9 to 5 wage. So this is a little journey down from when I first started to where I currently am now. This first picture will show the very first setup I had. I moved into this house 5 years ago. It was the first time I had any space to be able to create a games room or a streaming room or anything like that. You'll see from the picture itself, a lot of the things I have were old, terrible, barely usable, but it did mean that it could progress into something bigger. You'll see here that the PC itself was secondhand. I got it given to me. It was terrible. It literally couldn't do anything. I could barely run OBS on it. The monitor, again, secondhand, terrible. I don't think it lasted that long because I couldn't stand to look at it. The monitor on the left is actually an old TV. It didn't even have a stand, so it just leant against the wall. The chair was a nightmare in terms of you got backache the second you sat on that if you were trying to game. It's slightly led back so that you couldn't sit up properly when using it. In fact, the best thing in this setup at this point was the PlayStation 4. But even then, because of the monitors I had, it was still terrible to game on. But yeah, we can agree that that setup is not great, but it was the start. It was the very first one I ever had, and as I say, it could only get better from there, from how bad it currently was. Now you see from the second picture, I did make a few upgrades. I bought a new monitor, 27-inch Asus 1080p, nothing special, as well as the Elgato HD60S. That's when I wanted to start doing recordings from the PlayStation. So at that point, I did also need to start looking at getting a better PC. As I said, the previous one couldn't really do anything. Now you see from this picture, it did take a slight turn. I did move things around, but you can also see that we hadn't long moved in, which meant there was a lot of random junk dumped in this room. At the time, it was the spare room in the house, so anything we didn't know where it went, it basically got put in this room. At this point, I did downgrade to the one monitor rather than the two. You can see it on the floor there. The TV's just been dumped. There's nowhere else to put it. So again, slow upgrades, but it was taking a slight turn as it was. So then moving on, as you can see from the next picture, this is when a few extra upgrades got made. It was my birthday just before this, so I did get the Xbox One from my partner. So at that point, I had both the PlayStation and the Xbox. I also had a second-hand TV, again, the bigger one on the floor, which then became the gaming TV. You'll see in a future picture where that was put. But the biggest difference in this picture was the fact that at this point is when I bought myself a new PC. It wasn't anything major. It was a pre-built Asus ROG something or other. At the time, it cost me about £450. But for me, that was a huge purchase. I mean, that was when it all changed in terms of what I was able to do. That PC was able to run programs I wanted it to, base games, nothing special. But it was also able to record gameplay from the consoles I played on. So that's when I did start getting into the whole recording, making videos. But yeah, that was the biggest change. Also, you see that the little TV came back up on the desk just to give me a second monitor while I was playing games. Then Christmas happened. And again, as I said, this was the spare room as such. So it became the dumping ground. And as you can see in this picture, this was, I believe, Christmas Eve, where we had everything set up ready. You can see the old PC just dumped in the background there. Again, nowhere to put it. Didn't know what to do with it, just threw it in a corner. Again, I've moved that monitor off the desk again. It's under the old PC. Went back down to one monitor. And the big TV that I gamed on is now on that coffee table on the left. I spent a long time using that as the main console gaming monitor. Then this was the overall setup after Christmas when it was all tidied up a bit. You can see for the PC itself, I only had the one monitor on the desk because I used that bigger TV as the gaming TV. Again, it had no stand, so it was just resting against the wall. This coffee table also gave me a chance to have things tucked away and tidy things up a bit. I managed to get both the PlayStation and the Xbox underneath. The PC then was up on the main desk. I had a blue Snowball as my first microphone, just sat there as well. Now this is when everything changed again in a big way. I'd used this setup for a long time. It was probably maybe a year or so that I had this exact setup. It was at this point I wanted a bit more desk space, if you were. So you'll see from this next picture, this is when I wanted to take this a bit more seriously in terms of what I had. So this next picture shows the biggest change I made in this room to date. I decided at that point I was gonna need a bigger desk. Now, I did look at buying your standard IKEA desks or any other desk I could get hold of, but what I wanted was the ability to have it so that it could potentially be a two-person setup. The main reason was this was the spare room in the house, and I didn't want to take it as just my own. I wanted to be able to use the reason that I needed this desk and this room, not only for myself, but if any of my partner or my kids needed to come up here and do a bit of work, there'd be another space up there, so it'd be more of a family office area. So we built this desk. It was the width of the room. It was an 8-foot desk, 4 foot out from the left, and I believe only 3 foot out from the right. The intention of this desk itself was to have 2 corner desks and eventually have it set up for 2 people to set up here whenever they needed to. You see from the desk itself, it has the little cutouts in the legs there. The main reason for that is because I've never been one for cable management, so I figured if I had the legs all the way around, I could tuck any wires I wanted behind, but obviously still needed the access to the plugs on both sides, so we cut a little square up. This was it when I was painting it. I went for a standard grey colour just to keep it neutral with the rest of the room being white. This was mid-progress, and it did take a couple of days to get it to where I wanted it to be. As you see, just more painting, this time the underside of the desk just to clean that up a bit. And then once it was all finished, this is how the overall desk looked. My PC was going to be in the corner there. The right hand side was going to be left open for somewhere else to sit at. But yeah, this is the desk I had for a very long time. And then this was the overall setup once it was pretty much complete. Obviously you can see in the corner there's still the paint sheets. All of that was still down there just based on the fact that this was pretty much day one of me putting everything back together. I built a space in the middle with the 2 legs there for the PlayStation and Xbox to go so that they were off the desk. And we also fit cheap LED lights around the outside, which the fact they were cheap, they're still going to this day. And this would have been about 3 years ago, I believe. So you still got the LED lights around the back. Still got the standard setup, and at this time I put the bigger monitor in the middle. Found the stand for it eventually, but yeah, it got put in the middle so that if I was gaming I'd sit more central of the room, and if I was at the computer I'd sit in the corner. Now this is when I put some shelves up. Tried to get all the pop vinyls and stuff. As the collection started getting bigger, I wanted them off the desk, so I put a couple of floating shelves up from IKEA. I also got a soundbar for the TV, which I believe never got plugged in because I would only ever game with a headset on. So this was the overall setup, and as you see, the chair had a slight upgrade as well. One thing to notice though, that the bottom right corner of the desk, because I was the only one that was coming up here, that area became a dumping ground. Anything I didn't know where it was going, whether it be bags, hats, I believe even the paint sheets and the paint got dumped there for a long time. But the rest of the desk itself was fairly clean and tidy. I believe at this point it was around the time that my PC decided that it was no longer going to work. No matter what I did to it, it wouldn't turn on. It wouldn't post anything to the monitor. It wouldn't do anything. I think I only had that PC for all of about 6 to 8 months before it packed in. So again, at this point, I took that as an opportunity to maybe upgrade somewhere. And at this point, it was coming up to Christmas again. I didn't really need anything other than a new PC. So I got a load of vouchers and Amazon vouchers and things just to be able to put towards buying something. And that's when I decided to build my own PC. At the time, it was a fairly mid-range gaming PC. I wasn't going high spec. Yeah, it was a fairly low budget for what I wanted. I didn't know a lot about PCs at the time either, and especially when it came to building your own. A lot of research to figure out what went together, what would work well with what I wanted to do, but also had to fit into the tight budget I currently had at the time. So you can see, obviously, we got the NZXT S340 tower that I specifically chose for the colors. But this is the full picture of everything I bought at the time to build this PC. So you got the GTX 1060, you had a 650 power supply, the SSDs, the 16 gig of RAM, an Asus TUF motherboard that I was recommended. I also bought a new mouse, which is the Razer Death Adder, and a new headset, the Corsair Void Pro. Yeah, that was the full setup. That was the best I could get at the time that fit the budget and all went together well. So this was the first picture I took. As terrible and blurry as this picture is, this is the first one I took of me putting the PC back in the room. You can see all the wires out at the bottom is where I'm attempting to get it all wired up and ready to go. This then became this. As you can see at this point, I have the original monitor I had on the right. The middle monitor, I believe, again was just the old TV screen, and the little tiny one we had on the left again was just a throwaway TV that we had in the house that I managed to get hold of. I did it mainly just to have a bit more screen real estate. But yeah, this is how it looked after I got the PC and after I got everything. And this is just a lighter picture of it. As you can see, the chair's still there. Big TV was still on the left. Having it this set up was the only way I could have it where that TV fit with all the other monitors as well. It did mean that if I was playing console games on the PC on the left, that I couldn't really see what was going on the right, so it wasn't particularly ideal. Also, I built it originally for 2 people, but again, I was the only one up there, so I set everything up in the center of the desk. Main downside to that was the fact that the 2 legs in the middle got in the way of where I sat. I was still using the Sony headphones for when I played consoles, but it was the Corsair Voids I used when I played PC, which at the time wasn't a huge amount anyway. Now, you don't see it in the pictures, but after this, I did find that I'd moved everything across to the left to make space for the second setup, because my partner was getting into Sims again at that time. So we set it up so that on her side, she had a TV. But in order to play Sims, we had to switch the HDMI cable out from my PC, from my monitor, to a monitor she had, which also meant that I had to move the mouse and keyboard across to her side as well, so she was able to play Sims. It did mean that I lost any access to my own PC because she was on it. So at this point, I managed to save up a bit of money. I've been looking on some of the marketplaces on Gumtree, Facebook, things like that, and I did manage to find a second-hand PC for my partner to be able to play Sims on. Now, this PC is exactly the same as it was now as it was that day. The PC itself isn't great at all. I couldn't even tell you the specs of the PC because half of it is so old that it barely runs anything. I mean, for her it was good. The specs for Sims was low, as well as anything else she needed to do on the PC, and she's not a big gamer, so in terms of what she did play, it was good enough for that. And after getting this PC, I did manage to move everything in a way that we could both sit at the desk. Now, this was the first time that we had it so that it was a 2-person setup. The TV itself she got, so it's now on her side. With that PC, I did also get a Razer keyboard. I also swapped out my blue Snowball white version for the black one, just so it fit in a bit better. Now, this one is when we start getting a bit more into the video recording and wanted to take it a bit further, so I got a massive light to sit behind the monitor. This was also when I got 2 more monitors, again second-hand, 1080p. I think they cost me £50 each from a friend of mine, and that's when I started getting things like monitor stands to hold additional monitors, so it didn't take up too much room on the desk. So I did have to put the PC on the floor, but this did mean it was obviously under my feet. I was kicking it constantly, it was in the way, but it was a sacrifice I made to be able to have the 3 monitors for the PC as well as the TV for the gaming. You can see the monitor stand on the right that held the 2 monitors was just huge, and the desk itself wasn't particularly deep, so I had no additional desk space after that. I also needed a mouse mat. As you can see, I was using what I believe to be a Tesco club card letter that we got through the post as my mat, as well as another envelope for a coaster for the glasses. The desk itself was a bit of a mess at this point. There wasn't a lot of space to put anything, and I had bags under the desk, I had stuff everywhere. It was a bit difficult to work with, but eventually we got a new mouse mat. Surprisingly, this mouse mat came from Wish. I did not believe it was going to turn up, but after 2 weeks it finally arrived. As you can see on the left, the new keyboard as well. It was the Razer Black Widow. I got all 3 of them for my birthday from my partner. So we got the new HD60 Pro to go in the PC, an upgrade from the HD60S. I also had been looking at the Stream Deck for a long period of time before I asked for it. I wasn't 100% sure if I'd ever use it or what I would use it for. I just liked the idea of it. So at that point I did get the Mini just so it was slightly cheaper. I didn't want to go all out and get something a bit bigger. So we got the Mini, I set it up on my desk and immediately fell in love with the thing. It was one of the best things I had on my desk setup at this point. I loved everything you could do with it, the amount of options you could have, and although it was only a 6-button Stream Deck, with the fact that you can add folders, it was an infinite amount that you could do with it. Now, if you ignore and look past all the mess on this picture, this is how the desk eventually got to. The biggest upgrade you'll see in this picture is obviously I got a new chair, which, like I said, do not buy one of these chairs. After an hour of sitting on that, it's like sitting on a plank of wood. It was terrible. If you are going to buy a chair, buy something a bit more premium, or just go for a standard office chair. I mean, the chair I'm using at the moment is a basic office chair, and I can tell you for a fact that it is 10 times better than any of the gaming chairs that you can buy for £130. But you can also see that in this picture I do have the standard size Stream Deck. After falling in love with the Mini, I decided to get the standard size. So for this one, you can see that there are a few big upgrades. The most obvious being the Go XLR on the left. Best purchase I ever made in terms of this setup. It was recommended by a lot of streamers, which is what caught my eye. Every single person that owned one said it was the best thing you could own for audio. And to be honest, it was probably the biggest purchase after the PC. It was the most expensive and the purchase I debated for so long before I did buy it. But I'm so glad, and if you get the opportunity to buy one, definitely do. The other obvious change is the Scuff Controller. Now it's got the green and purple colorway. Now, in terms of the Scuff Controller, the controller itself feels amazing. It plays amazing. With the additional buttons on the back, it is an amazing controller. But all I can say about Scuff, for the price of what you pay, I mean, that controller cost me just over £200. That's shipping from the US. The controller lasted all of 6 months before I stopped using it anymore. Now, the main reason for this is because the left analog stick, the rubber on top, turned to mush. It deformed in shape and it didn't feel great. But the main reason I stopped using it is because the R2 button on the back, I believe the spring or something inside must have broken to the point that once pressed, it just didn't return to its original position, which meant that you had to fiddle around with it. So when playing shooter games, it became very difficult to use that controller. Now, you might think it was a one-off, but actually at the time of me buying that, 2 of my friends also bought the same controllers, and none of us had it last longer than 6 months. Each of us have had problems with our Scuff controllers. 2 of them have sent theirs back to get fixed. I didn't bother in the end. I left it as it was. What you'll also notice that is the desk itself has changed. Now, at this point, I was getting annoyed with the fact that on my old desk, as you can see here, once you've got the monitors, the keyboard, there's no desk space at all. You had no distance between any of those 2 things. So what I wanted is a bit more room to be able to put stuff on the desk, or just even have my arms up. At this point I couldn't do anything. So what we did was, we kept the original desk, still here now, but we put another layer on top of it, be able to have a bit more desk space. It did come out a little bit further than the last desk, but what we also did was, as you can see in the bottom corner, there is a gap between the two. Now the reason for this is that I put floating shelves from IKEA between the two desks so that it would create a gap between the two of them, so when I put some RGB lighting underneath, it looked like a light bar that went through the middle of it. As you can see in this picture, the light bar did come out perfect with the same LEDs around the back from when I originally built the first desk, but now in the front I had what looks to be a light bar that goes between the two of them. I saw it on the YouTube video and thought it was a really good idea, so I threw it into this one as well. Now this is a more recent picture, so we're getting closer to where we are now. The desk itself was vinyl wrapped. We didn't paint it this time, but also, as you can see from this picture, we did upgrade the mic, which I believe I did just after the Go XLR, but this is obviously the next picture that shows it. We got the Blue Ember as recommended by certain YouTubers as well, to partner with the Go XLR. So I elevated the mic up onto the shelf itself, just used the standard mic arm. As you can see from this picture, we upgraded some of the lighting as well. So not only have we got the RGB through the desk itself, rather than buying big colourful lights to light behind me, I went on Amazon and bought some floodlights, just RGB floodlights, fairly cheap for the pair, and I used both of them just to light up the room behind. Now this picture is from when we first went into lockdown last March. I was working from home. I had a work laptop but needed to buy an additional mouse and keyboard because I didn't want to use the ones I already had, because I also wanted access to my own computer as well. They gave us a little tablet, so I bought a Ani Pro 2 keyboard as well as a wireless Corsair mouse, and nothing major, nothing really expensive to go with it, but it did allow me to keep the Razer keyboard and mouse for my PC. And as you can see from this picture, the biggest focus on this one is actually I changed the mic placement so it was more above me, so I had access to all three monitors again. The headset I actually use and still use to this day for gaming is a Skull Candy Crusher headset. Now the other big change at this point was actually the controller I was using. I still wanted a controller that had buttons on the back, but rather than buying another Scuff controller, I researched Nakom Revolution controllers, which I've owned now for over a year and a half, which is 3 times the length I had the Scuff controller for, and as of yet still no problems with the controller itself. I'll do a more in-depth review on that in a future video, but I can recommend the Nakom Revolution so much higher than I can the Scuff controller, and it's almost half the price, but we'll go into that in a future video. Now that's the last picture I took of this room before where it is now. There are only a few differences between that last picture and the current state of this room, but what I want to do is, because this video has gone on quite long already, in tomorrow's video I'll be posting a full tour of my room itself, a bit more detail into some of the things that I have, a bit more information in terms of pricing, things like that, just so you get an overall idea of how much it's cost to get to this point, how long it's taken to get to this point. As I said at the beginning, it's not an overnight thing. For a lot of us, it's a case of a gradual, slow progress to get to where we are. Even now, I can tell you there's a lot about this room that I would still change. There's a lot of future ideas that I want to do, and a lot of purchases I want to make to be able to get this room to where I want it to be. But in tomorrow's video, I'll show you the full room as it is now. I'll do a full tour of everything I currently have. You can already see in the background there are some slight differences between what it was and what it is now. But yeah, we'll go into tomorrow's video with that. So if you like this video and you want to see more, do hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.